We are good. Okay.
Cool.
There,
All right. Well, welcome everybody to, well, all zero of you. Wait, one of you. Welcome you to Kitchen Sink Microscopy. We are live and dapper as always.
oh yeah.
So, usually before we go live, we record an upcoming Lightning Strikes Twice, and sometimes we just want to keep riffing on what we were talking about there. So,
Mhm.
I think that's what we're going to do here in this sort of idea of global anarchism
Mhm.
is kind of a fun thought experiment, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, for context, I was kind of positing that if you look at each country as an individual, the globe does already kind of operate in an anarchistic fashion. Like
Yeah.
everybody kind of does their own thing. Uh,
Mhm.
so, from there, we can probably go in 5 million different directions.
I'm sure we will. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know like I know you being like an anarchist, of
Mhm.
course, like you're probably all in favor of that, but like do you think from where we're at now as a globe,
Mhm.
could that actually be adopted in a more literal sense?
I think so. I mean, like you'd said, we kind of as a planet already sort of operate that way. Um, there's cooperation and conflict that exist, which exists in human uh, civilization, um, and we find a way to make it work. Like just with individuals in a town, you're like, oh well, we all got to work together if we're going to survive. Um, you would have the same effect with countries. That that like, well, yeah, of course we can have. There will be conflict, but it's in our interest to resolve conflict quickly and peacefully wherever possible.
Yeah.
Especially now, I think things are to such a scale that the implications of conflict are much more dire than they used to be, and it's much more obvious that that violent conflict is generally stupid.
Oh yeah.
Everybody loses. Like I one of my sayings, it's like, in war there are no winners, there are only survivors, and that's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
Because it used to be a long time ago that you'd have armies come together in the battlefield and they'd duke it out, and then whoever was still left standing was the winner, I guess. But now it's like whole entire countries are destroyed,
Yeah.
like on both sides of a conflict or any side of a conflict. Like everything gets destroyed, people die senselessly, and then at the end of the day, you're left picking up the pieces and putting it all back together. And it's like, but it used to be together,
Yeah.
and your disagreement took that apart. And for
It's
what?
totally ridiculous. And like there's zero humanity in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh no, in
and
fact, it's like dehumanization is a component of that,
yeah. Well,
where
now
people,
Putin's just straight up bombing like neighborhoods,
yeah.
like trying to kind of like terrorize,
Mm-hmm.
and demoralize because he can't win on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. I
And
mean, that the same thing happened in World War II, on
mhm.
all sides of the conflicts and stuff
Well, yeah,
like
I've got a tree out here in my front yard with bullets from World War II stuck in
that.
the trunk.
Wow.
Yes.
And there are buildings, yeah, all across Europe that are still, they have holes in them from some
Mhm.
conflict.
Yep.
Like, man, that's just crazy. But now it's like, if you look at it, think about it now. Okay, how are we as a world? It's like the US and Japan are best buddies, you know, and like Germany and the rest of Europe, they're all working together. Like
Yeah.
you have the European Union and stuff, and everybody's getting along for the most part. Like Okay, so what was the point of all that?
Right.
Where did it get us? I mean, I guess in a way, it's kind of, I'd say like Japan and the US, it's sort of like in school. Like, for instance, there was a kid who was a bully to a friend of mine, and I kicked his ass. And then we became friends. Like,
Yeah.
he was a really good friend of mine. It's like, but it before that, there was a lot of kind of friction where we didn't really get along. But it's like, all right, once we fight, then we're like, okay, well, okay, let's go have a beer.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's kind of what happened. So maybe conflict does have a benefit in that regard, but in the moment, I think it's highly destructive and probably unnecessary. Like, why can't we have some kind of limited conflict, right? Maybe a competition
Well,
or something.
exactly. It doesn't have to go as far as violence. The conflict itself, like the moment that created the friendship had
Mm.
nothing to do with the fight itself, but more like the realization that the conflict was stupid to begin
Yep,
with.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
you can skip all that shit in the middle by
Hmm.
just jumping ahead to the point where you're like, wait a minute, this is stupid. Like,
Exactly. Well, it takes kind of stepping outside of your own self, and your own kind of philosophy and perception of things, and trying to see the other side, and find some middle ground, or a little bit of understanding. That goes a long way.
yeah,
And of course, trade. That's one reason why so many countries in the world now get along, because it's like, well, they're dependent on each other. It's like
yeah.
China and the US would never go to war, hot war, because of their interdependence. And the same thing with a lot of other countries. And the more we can encourage that, where everybody needs everybody else to contribute something, the less likely conflict will exist. And the more
Yeah.
likely people are going to be willing to talk rather than fight.
And this whole trade war is fucking ridiculous because it's essentially just poisoning the well that you're drinking out of too. You know,
Yeah. Okay. But I will say, at the very least, it's just a bureaucratic conflict and not guns and bombs. So, like, as long as you can avoid that,
yep,
basically, it's
but
like it's
but
sort
it
of
does
akin
have
to that.
like it does have real negative ramifications
Mhm.
that affect innocent people, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, exactly. And
like
that.
like starving people out because they can't afford shit anymore, you know,
Mhm.
like that's not cool at all. Like
No,
it's
no, but
never the ones starting the fight that actually have any risk whatsoever in the
this is
game.
true.
Like,
Well, yeah, the leader of a country sending people to war, they're not the one at the in the front lines of the battle.
where did that change? Like
Yeah, because
I
Napoleon used to be like right in the
Yeah,
front.
kings used to be out there like
Hmm.
with their sword and shield, riding on their horse, and
Yeah.
you know, like okay, sure, people might crowd around him to defend him a little bit, but at least he's there, like doing
Exactly.
something.
Yeah.
Like,
Which it's like, okay, at that point, as just a regular soldier, you could be like, whoa, this conflict must be justified, because
yeah,
the guy that we look up to, who's our king, is out there too.
at the
So,
very least, you have some morale. You know, like,
yeah, yeah,
okay,
exactly.
well, if he's willing to die for this, I guess I should
Hmm.
too. And you know,
Sure. And well, and maybe, one problem is motivating people to come to the table and talk. It's really hard. Sometimes it takes something big, and I I guess my problem, I guess, with like the way everything's being conducted with tariffs and whatnot, is that it isn't clear what the reason is, because most people, kind of like rationing during World War II, right? They're like, well, we got a ration because that's the reason there's steel pennies, because we need copper for the war effort. We need food to send off to the soldiers. So have your victory garden, and tighten your belt a little bit, because we gotta win. And like, this is the problem with this, is like with the tariff thing, it isn't made clear what the rationale is at all. So people are kind of left wondering, like, well, okay, well, I mean, this sucks, but why does it? There's really no clear direction. And so if the direction is, for instance, to encourage other countries to negotiate, then make that evident, right? Like
Right.
the whole point is we're sticking it to these guys so they'll come and we'll come up with some kind of trade agreement that benefits everybody, especially us, right? Because that's kind of, wouldn't that be the point? Like that, because that is a valid thing to do. It's, people do that all the time as part of negotiation. um and and so ultimately, the if I'd like to see tariffs just go away altogether. So if
Yeah.
that happens at the end of the day, if like everybody drops all tariffs and we can freely trade without really any kind of anything, maybe like a small tariff, right? Like everybody's like, oh, it's like sales tax. There's a sales tax just across the board. But in general, we just trade freely, whatever. There's no picking and choosing amongst whatever products and things like that. It's just like, ah, yeah, this is the tariff. Everybody charges that. Then that would be good,
Yeah.
because it is really imbalanced and wackadoodle. If you look at some of the things, it's just like, what, why can't we? Imagine, actually going back to the analogy of humans, like countries being people. Imagine if different people charged different amounts for different things, but only for certain people. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to charge you $10 for that thing, but my neighbor over there, I'm charging him $100 for the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
how does that make
That
any bloody sense?
that is yeah. That is a good point. Like that's exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that is stupid. Like uh yeah. I mean, yeah, it's you could say that it's sort of the same thing if you offer discounts to people for being in the military or something, but
Yeah, yeah,
that's
sure.
like that's a discount. Like it's still based off of the same price, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
like there's
I
a,
guess tariffs are too. Like it's just a percentage, right? But
yeah, it's a percentage,
yeah,
but it's
it's still
arbitrary.
ridiculous. Like
It's
yeah, and
it's
far
arbitrary.
too
Like
complicated.
I mean, because I think we've talked about this before, but like the chicken tax, right? That's been
Hmm.
going on forever, which is why like Ford, they have a factory over in Europe. I don't remember exactly where, but they make the Transit and the Transit Connect, like cargo vans, basically. But there's this huge tariff on trucks coming from Europe. So what they do, like, okay, it's work trucks specifically, like, panel vans and things like that. So what they do, they manufacture the van with windows and seats and import it as just a passenger van, which doesn't have this high tariff. And then they take the windows out and put panels, like solid metal panels in, and take the seats out and put in like rubber flooring for cargo purposes. Like, what? You shouldn't have to do that. What the hell?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
that's the thing. There's these weird arbitrary things, and a lot of it's like protectionist.
I
Um,
have two questions. Like one, if the government wanted to get around that, couldn't they like log the VIN numbers and then be like, wait a minute, now this VIN number is all of a sudden a truck when it looked like a van before, you know?
I suppose they could, but I
And
don't
then
think that's
second, what does this have to do with chickens?
it. It's going way back. I think it was before I was born, but it was basically like it's a reciprocal tariff for, oh God, what was it?
Is it like the game chicken?
No, like chickens. It's something I can't. There was one tariff going one way, so it's like now there's a reciprocal tariff on trucks. Like, oh
Trucks
well,
that chickens can drive
no,
or
no, no,
trucks that are
just trucks.
carrying chickens?
No, it's one tariff for another tariff. Like, so they're totally unrelated. Basically it's why you don't see a lot of European trucks in the States.
Yeah.
Um, that's
There
just,
aren't a lot of European trucks in general, actually.
no, but I mean there might be like, there's a few like heavy trucks. Volvo, I know there's a lot of Volvo trucks in the US, but
Yeah,
those things
yeah.
are already ungodly expensive. So it's like, what does 25% matter when you're paying like $400,000, you know?
Mm, yeah. All those,
But
like you're talking about, like the big rigs, right?
yeah, yeah.
All those, by the way, here are totally different looking. Like
Hmm.
they're all flat
Yep.
faced.
Cab over. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that there's a whole story behind that too. But like it is interesting that European trucks that yeah, they have the cab over design, it's flat. Whereas in the
yeah,
US, a lot of have the engine in the front. Yeah, it's a weird one.
yeah,
But like it is kind of stupid. And honestly, maybe the benefit of this like crazy tariff thing will be to highlight to the rest of the world how stupid tariffs are.
yeah,
Like, I hope that that's the ultimate outcome that everybody's like scratching their head, like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. And then we just say, yeah, fuck it. Let's get rid of tariffs altogether or just make it
yeah.
real small.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made for like needing a global shakeup in order to, um, like bring about a needed and an overall very good change
Yeah.
in
It,
things, right?
well, because people get complacent, right? They just kind of
Yeah,
like, whatever, it's not worth the effort, or they just don't care or don't notice. It's just sort of like, that's just the way it is. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, ultimately, I'd like to see more trade, lots of trade. We should be trading very freely without a lot of restrictions. Like, I think we are to that point as a planet where that is the way we should be doing things. Yeah. Oh, we have a note about the chicken tax.
ah, the chicken tax is a 25% tariff on light trucks and originally potato starch, dextrin, and brandy, which is what chickens are made of, uh, imposed in 1964 by the United States under Lyndon B. Johnson, um, responding to French tariffs and West Germany on importation of chicken. Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Huh, okay. Chicken war.
Yeah. Well, and see, like, I don't, tariffs should be, it's sort of like how I feel about unions. A union is a good thing when it's constructed in the moment to respond to a specific circumstance, like a particular problem. Um, and you form it and you use the power of the union to affect change, and then you dissolve it because now the change has been made. Tariffs ought to operate the same way. Like, hey, there's this weird imbalance. Why don't we impose a tariff temporarily to correct this imbalance, and then we'll get rid of it? Like, yeah, the 60s.
But
That's why I don't remember because I wasn't even born then.
okay,
Um,
but with unions though, like if the union goes away, of course they're just going to go right back to whatever was, you
well,
know,
then you create
what,
another union. I mean,
but what like that's ridiculous then,
well,
like
the union should just be like I guess um, a project, right? That you can form at any time for any purpose, um, and try to affect change. Because the thing is, you can affect change in a contractual way. So once the contract is signed and both parties have agreed to the terms, that's it. They can want to change things all they want, but they have signed a contract stating this is how we're going to do things moving forward. And that, there you go. So why do you need
yeah,
a union after that?
because if you dissolve one party of the contract, you've dissolved the contract.
No, the contract would be between the workers. The union is a
Yeah.
like the
I mean, better would be to just have unions for everything and not have them cost money. Just have it
well,
be
yeah,
like, look, like collective bargaining is just how it works, you know?
and that is how it works in most of the world. Like there's a lot of countries they don't have a minimum wage. It's collective bargaining. And it seems to work out just fine. And that's like an anarchistic way of doing things, which I am totally on board with. You just,
Hmm.
like you don't have to have any formality there.
Yeah. Like
Like
like why should it be that you can't go on strike if you're being treated unfairly? Only if you
exactly.
have a union. Like what? Like
That
how
makes no
restrictive
sense.
is that?
Well, and
Yeah.
not only that, but as far as I know, you can't just make a union. You can't just be
No,
like, oh, let's all work together as employees. Let's come together and we're going to go on strike. No, you got to ask permission,
right.
essentially.
And they make it out like you're trying to do some kind of subversive
Mm.
fucking like I don't know, like
And that might
traitorous
be,
thing if you talk
yeah,
about unions and it's like,
and
whoa.
and that might be because of the track record of some unions and the persistence of unions, like kind of once they're there they never go away, so that could be problematic from a like a business standpoint. Who knows, but if it were more kind of loosey goosey, then yeah, it's like, hey, there's a working condition problem, we need to correct it, everybody gets together and you just walk out, right?
I mean,
That
if a union never goes away, uh, as long as you're not poking it with a stick over and over again, you wouldn't really even notice it, right?
Well, some unions though become very bureaucratic and they end up going way beyond the bounds of their original intent.
Yeah,
Mission creep, essentially. And that's
yeah,
kind of, I think, the concern for a lot of people. Whereas, like, okay, if it wasn't like that, if it was a temporary thing to correct an issue,
yeah.
then what would be the
Bureaucracy
harm?
fucks everything up.
It does. It absolutely does.
It like
And of course,
it begins to exist just to propagate its own existence and stuff.
yep. And in the case of unions, there's dues. So the union
Yep,
itself wants that money from the
yep.
employees. So they're always going to come up with some kind of
That's
thing to
why I'm saying
do.
just get rid of the fees altogether. Like
Yeah.
everybody gets a union and nobody's getting charged for it because
Mhm.
everybody is fucking like part of it. You know, like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you
Well, that's
contribute effort
collective
to it
bargaining.
and
You could do that for sure.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's like how working with different countries and stuff, like it applies the same way. I
Mm,
mean, everybody, every country has something that some other country wants and vice versa. And maybe say like one country, you may not have reciprocal uh trade necessarily, like maybe you don't necessarily want the thing that they have but they want the thing you have, and then some other country wants this thing, so it's kind of a circular trade system, as it ought to be. um and that's a good thing, because what you can have too is specialization, where different countries can just focus on only certain things and not worry about having to create everything.
yeah.
Like that is a very well, it's a very challenging place to be. At least the US, I guess, is kind of in the place to be able to pretty much make everything that we need. But like, we don't have to.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to. Because maybe it's inefficient in the US to make things that other countries already have stuff in place to efficiently and inexpensively craft whatever we need.
There is that argument. Yeah, like the whole problem with all these tariffs all at once,
Hmm.
so drastic is that like what's the plan here because there's no existing infrastructure and it would take years or decades
Yes.
to construct it
Hmm.
and you just overnight flip a switch and throw all these tariffs out thinking okay the jobs will just poof reappear here, right? Like
That's one of the problems, is like it's only, there's a lot of things that need to be in place to be able to do that. Let's say the goal is jobs and manufacturing in the US, which is the stated goal. Well, okay, that's fine. And perhaps you could accomplish that with high tariffs to just kind of push things. Um, but you have to also have the infrastructure in place to be able to do those things in the meantime.
yeah,
And yeah, we can do it. It's obviously the US manufactured literally everything back in the day, but all those things kind of moved and spread out to different places. And we don't have the capacity to make everything right
yeah.
now. So maybe it would be better to maybe do some things initially, start by deregulation and get rid of some of the red tape and the bureaucracy around starting manufacturing businesses. For a while, give like massive tax breaks to, and do whatever you can do to encourage companies to build up, and then
Well,
you put the tariffs on, and then it's like, oh shit, we better be manufacturing in the US, we already can do it, so let's tool up.
I tell you what the major problem is though is the numbers that we ascribe to things with value and money and inflation and all the whole jumble fuck that is, our economy as it stands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the whole problem is nobody wants to do all that work that China does for pennies on the dollar because it would be dollars on the dollar here
Well,
and
and
make
one of
everything super expensive, right?
the
The
thing is,
work is the
China's,
same. Like
yeah.
the labor, the amount of like dynamic energy put
Mm-hmm.
into an item is 100% the same thing, but
Yeah, the
it's these
difference
stupid
being
numbers that we
the,
attach to things, you
the
know?
the difference being with China is that China's industrial base is subsidized by the government, and that's why it's able to sell things for so cheap.
Hmm.
There's a lot of government subsidy, and so it's like, well, we could do that here, but do we want to do that? Because that would take away from a whole bunch of other things, like, and that's where it's like, okay, that China is able to do that. They have incredible manufacturing capability. You know, that's a good thing, right? Like, we should trade. And although maybe the good thing too is like high tariffs might encourage the 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 things that people purchase from China to be more high quality, not all this cheap junk that ends up in the landfill. Because there is an ecological aspect to that. It's like, yeah, lots of people, Timu and Wish and these things, they buy a bunch of cheap shit that just gets thrown away, and like, or clothing that doesn't last, even though there's some good stuff, but like fast fashion. I know we've talked about that before, I think.
Well,
um
the other ecological angle is that like it would actually make sense to reduce trade and make geographical areas be able to stand on their own
yeah.
because of like all the incredible like CO2 emissions
Yeah.
from just shipping things on giant ships back and forth just to
Yeah,
sell them,
you have
you know?
ships, you have trains, you have trucks.
Yeah.
All of those are, yeah. And it's like, okay, if you could build more local, then you cut
Mhm.
out all that.
Yeah.
So like traveling, taking
Or
something
develop a
across.
replicator. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like in the meantime, yeah, I think if we do, trade is important, but we should be trading intelligently,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Like,
uh, we should be trading intelligence. Like
well,
just like,
true.
oh,
Yeah.
look, we made figured out a way to do this more efficiently. Oh, great, thank you. Like
And
trade on that
and
level
that's where
and
getting rid of patents and
yeah.
copyright and all that shit would be very beneficial. Like,
Hmm.
stop fighting that fight because it's not worth Yeah, we've talked about patents before. Maybe have a short-term patent, like a patent that only when you're making the thing, and only for like 5 years do you have sole ownership of that design, and then it just goes to the public domain. Like, it
Yeah.
ought to be that way. Like, that is also another huge, like, drain on the
I mean,
capacity to innovate.
I don't know if I would put a blanket time window on it. Um, it would make more sense to put kind of like a benchmark of, like, okay, when you file your patent,
Mm-hmm.
bring your receipts and say this is what I spent to get to this point. And
Mm-hmm.
once you reach that, the patent goes away. You can still make it and sell it, and you're still the one who came up with it. So you've got like the brand recognition and stuff, like
Yeah.
home field advantage.
Well, you could say,
You're still going to make money off of it hand over fist.
if it were an investment, you could say like, all right, well, here's the cost, the R&D cost,
Hmm.
and when you file for a patent, and then yeah, once you make like two times that, then now it's public domain. So you've
Yeah.
made a profit,
Yeah.
and there you go.
Hmm.
I think that's a pretty intelligent way to do it. That because that basically covers everything.
Yeah.
Um, that might make a
Yeah,
lot more
that is
sense.
intelligent because it basically like it's not like regulating how
Mm-hmm.
much money you can make. It's basically like regulating like how much you can flex your handicap, you know?
Sure. And the
And
thing is, ubiquity is a benefit to a company even without a patent, even without that copyright or control. It's like, you know, uh certain products, people will go, but like people will buy Bayer aspirin. They'll be
Mm,
like, oh, I only want Bayer, even though they haven't had a patent for aspirin for like 100 years or something like that.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's the most popular brand, and that's what people buy, but they'll buy the off brand too. So you have the option of cheap stuff, but you can spend a little more and get the name brand, which is essentially the same thing, but still people trust it. Trust is another factor. And
Mm.
the same applies to any product. That like you could still make a ton of money by being the most popular one, even if you don't even have control of the IP.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what you proposed is very fair and very sensible. That like yeah.
And see, that can be done. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it doesn't have to be all or none. Um, we've talked about this before, how anarchy and socialism are actually kind of the same thing, just with different methodologies.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about unions versus just collective bargaining as a group of workers, which
Mm-hmm.
is, kind of six of one, half dozen of the other,
Yeah.
but like some different methodology behind it. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's all it really comes down to is just like what is enough and
Mm-hmm.
what's too much, like
Yeah,
just
and that is something that to analyze and discuss. I
yeah,
mean,
like
I
that's
kind of
one of
like
the few places where moving the goalpost should be normalized and it's actually avoided, Like
yeah, yeah. Well, and following the scientific method, essentially, like tr- you do experiments and you observe the results and then you make adjustments
yeah.
and go from there. Or engineering, they're very
Mhm.
closely connected. um yeah, and I prefer the anarchistic approach because it's more open to like to innovation. Basically, you're unhindered by bureaucracy at that point. um and and to me, I think that's a good thing because you can react very fast to changing circumstances,
Yeah.
versus the bureaucratic route, which is all these rules and laws and all this stuff where it's like, oh, well, if you want to change that, it takes like a whole bunch of people to agree on that, and like, oh yeah, and even though that thing hasn't even been relevant for 200 years, we're still stuck with this stupid ass law, you know.
Although I think I think the root, like where bureaucracy comes from, is is the negotiation angle.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
there's a regulation proposed, and then the people that it let's say negatively impacts are like, wait, that's not fair. We want it to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
Paperwork becomes necessary for that in order
Yeah.
to protect their angle of things. And so like the more back and forth you get, the more paperwork you get. So
It becomes more formal.
yeah.
That's the thing.
So like yeah, the formalities, the whole idea of like bickering and tit for tat, like all that really, I mean, you can't undo that.
No.
That's part of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Undoing it is the regulation,
Yeah.
but then with that comes the bureaucracy. So
Exactly.
then
Well,
it
and the
becomes
bureaucracy also
a
has a
drudgery.
managerial, it has a managerial role, I guess, in that like, oh well, how do we oversee the operation of this thing? And that really, as long as that is the goal, then a bureaucracy will remain relatively small. Um,
If it's just investigatory, is that a
mm-hmm.
word?
Investigatory,
Like
or
if they're
yeah.
just investigating like complaints
Mm-hmm.
or something, that would be fine. But if it's like, oh, you've got to file this for this kind of permit first and blah blah
Mm-hmm.
blah, or like
Oh, it gets, and it's like, I was looking into that because like I was, yesterday we were looking at like um what would be involved in building on the land in Nevada. And it's like,
uh,
yeah, there's all sorts of hoops you got to jump through and all sorts of steps and like these different, and this is in Nevada, this is in the county. It's like, and I was thinking, people back in the day, let's say the gold rush and moving west and all that stuff, they came to places that were largely untouched. There was no government, there were no rules, there were no permits or anything, and they built up whole entire cities without any of that stuff. most of them still stand to this day. Like, the humans are able to work and do things safely and effectively without any oversight. And generally, the oversight might be an expert or somebody who's like, oh, I know how to do this. Some people who know how to build things, they would go and they would build things. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of buildings that were made during that time that are still standing. Like,
Hmm.
that's crazy. And there were no regulations. Like, how is that? So
Yeah.
maybe, maybe it turns out we don't need any of these regulations. You know, like maybe they don't do anything. They just, basically, it's just like you were saying about unions and stuff, like existing to further their own existence. And
Yeah.
I'm of the mind that a lot of these bureaucracies propagandize the public to help make them believe that in the absence of these bureaucratic systems, that it would be chaos, right? It would be like so dangerous and shit would be burning and falling down left and right. It's like, no, that would not happen. If you live in a place and you're building a house to live in, you don't want to build a house that's going to fall down. That's
Right.
stupid. You know, like, why would you do that? You know, you build it to last.
Hmm.
And most people want that. And if you're going to rent a place, you don't want to rent a shithole that's like, oh wow, like the whole building is leaning. You know, like, wow,
Yeah.
this is dangerous. So people have an incentive to build something when they're selling something, to build it to be good. And it's like, so really, do we need the bureaucratic system should only exist as an advisory role, right? Like if you're building a house, you go to this wherever, this organization, and you say, hey, I'm going to build a house. They're like, okay, well, we have this whole packet. It'll cost you $100 for this packet. And then if you want to us to be like advisors during the process, where you can call us up and ask questions, there's a monthly fee for that or whatever. There's some kind of fee, and you pay it, and that pays for the functionality of this system. And they give you like a handbook, like here's how you build a house, or maybe here's the companies we recommend if you don't want to do it yourself, and these are the
Yeah.
ones that pass the test and stuff. Like, but then you're free to kind of do whatever you want to do, and that also allows for innovation, because one of the problems too, like with all these bureaucratic systems, like there's so many good ideas out there for building houses, like 3D printing houses, the earthship houses, dome houses, tiny houses, there's so many different things, and they're kind of blocked by the system, because
Hmm.
it's like, oh, well, that's highly irregular. Like, what the hell is that? We don't even have anything on the books for that. Well, yeah. So what? Just let people build housing.
Yeah.
Like that's a good thing. We want innovation. We want forward thinking. You know, like why does everything have to be this particular way? Oh, because the bureaucracy says so. Like what the hell? That's dumb. I mean, and I was looking into it too, like the property in Nevada. One of the prerequisites of building to live there is you have to have a well. But it's like, okay, well, you don't even have to like make that a requirement. It's kind of bleeding obvious. It's in the desert. Of
Yeah.
course you want a well. Like, why would you not have a well? What would you do in the without a well? You know, like, okay, sure. But then they're like, oh, you have to use a licensed well drilling company to drill the well. Oh, okay. So now it's all stupid again.
Hmm.
But like, okay, in a sense, I do get that. I mean, it would. There are options for a well if it's shallow, like doing it by hand, like a well point or something. You could definitely do that. But yeah, I guess if you're drilling down like 200 feet, I would hire a company to do that. That sounds like
Yeah.
ass.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're gonna do that anyway. So yeah, like it it's more of a formality, like
Mm-hmm.
than than it is really like a I-
Well,
chain around your ankle, like it's
yeah, but it's like, okay, try drilling a well that's 200 feet deep by yourself, and
mm-hmm,
and then
mm-hmm.
come back to me, and
That's
you're gonna
that's
be
what I'm
like,
saying. It's like
you know,
it's not like you would be doing that anyway. It just
mm-hmm,
feels like it tugs at a certain like primal
mm-hmm.
urge to not want to do something just because somebody said you have to do
Yep,
it.
exactly. Yeah, and
Like,
that's where if these bureaucratic systems operated in an advisory role, then people would be like, "Oh, I'm totally willing to do that because y'all are the smart ones, all these engineers and people and that know all this stuff, and you've provided this well-produced packet that explains everything that I should do, and like now I'm just going to do it because that makes sense." It's sort of like following a handbook or an instruction manual that, like, you get it'd be kind of like you get a Lego set, right? And it has the instructions on how to build, and they're like really well put together. And but imagine if you just said, no, like if it was almost like in order to buy this Lego set, you had to sign a contract, an agreement that you will follow the instructions to the letter. Like, you know, a lot of people would be like, yeah, fuck you, you know,
right. Yeah.
but otherwise it's really fun. You open it up, you look at the pieces, you look at the instructions, you start putting it together, and then there you go. And now you have assembled your thing. But you're also free to deviate. You could be
Yeah.
like, oh, I got some extra things from another set that I'm going to incorporate into this thing.
I never followed Lego instructions. I was always a rebel.
I
It
only did
it
it the first time, like
yeah.
to put the kit together and look at it and like, oh wow, that's cool. Then you take it apart and then put it in the bin with all the other parts.
Yeah, it's nice to think that people would respond better to advice, but they take it in the exact same way as if it were a decree. And
Some do.
like, I mean, COVID showed us that, but even when I was a kid, like fourth grade or something,
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend in school that lived all the way out in Buckley, like out in the
Mm-hmm.
country.
Yeah.
And went out to his house and we were just wandering around in the
Mm-hmm.
countryside and just goofing off. And we're along this highway and we're looking at this farm from the other side of the fence. And I think my friend was like about to like go inside the fence. And this kid rides up on a bicycle and he's like, "Hey, that's not your property. You can't go in there." And he was like, "I just wanted to see something." There was like a car engine or something just sitting in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "You can't do that. Like you got to go." And we're like, "All right, all right, all right." And then I look down the road and I see a car coming. And this kid in the bike is just sitting in the middle of the fucking highway. And I was like, "Oh, you should probably move. There's a car coming." And he looks at the car and he like gets out of the way. And after the car goes by, he's like, "Don't tell me what to do." And he socks me in the jaw. I was like,
What?
"I didn't tell you what to do. I said you probably should."
Yeah.
It was an advice, and he took it as a fucking command.
Well,
Like,
and
never mind that it saved his life. He was still pissed off about it. Like,
that unfortunately is going to be present no matter what. Whether there are
that's what I'm saying. Like,
advisory things or whether there are compulsory things that are enforced at the barrel of a gun,
yeah,
people will still be defiant because that's
yeah.
what people do. People, a lot of people
It's
just
very
are like,
immature at the core, but like,
it is. But I think it's easier to convince people to follow a certain set of instructions when it's asked of them, not told of them. I like that. You're going to get more people
yeah,
to to go along with something when it's like, hey, like we're the people who know these things, and people do that all the time. It's like remodeling your house or whatever. A lot of people don't just go do it; they'll go get a book or watch some videos and stuff, and then like they'll take advice from people who do that for a living, and then they'll
yeah.
follow that advice like
I
that.
mean,
That is
all you got to do is like the warranty void tactic, right?
mm-hmm.
Even if you're the
Yeah.
government, like, hey, if you don't follow these guidelines, you can't sue us when you
Mm-hmm.
fuck up. You know,
Yeah.
like,
Well, actually, here's the thing: insurance will be that regulatory system. Because like, yeah, of course you want, like, you have a house or you have a car, you want insurance because hey, if something happens, or if you have a human body, right? You
yeah,
want insurance. So the insurance companies would be like, all right, well, we will insure your property only if these conditions are met. will insure your car only if these conditions are met. And so that's the thing. If a car manufacturer makes cars that don't fit those conditions, people aren't going to buy them because they're like, I can't insure it, you know? So the car manufacturers are simply just going to, they'll probably go to the insurance companies and say, well, what conditions do we have to meet, the minimum conditions? And they'd be like, well, this, and this, or whatever. And there you go. And that's kind of how things just naturally evolve. And I think that's a better
Yeah.
way. Funny how we wandered off in this direction. It is
Yeah.
related though. Because it's kind of related to like bureaucracy controlling
Yeah.
things versus just letting people do things on their own.
Hmm.
Because I believe most people are good. And if you leave people alone, leave them to their own devices, they'll sort things out naturally. And they'll be better at it than any oversight organization could possibly be. Because they're the ones on the front lines. They're the ones down in the field doing the work, experiencing things. They're going to know better what to do than somebody who's really far away who has no connection whatsoever with those things.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with trade. Trying to put tariffs on things, expecting, oh, if I just do this thing, it's that whole like Keynesian economics sort of thing. Like, oh, the economy is a system of, it's a machine, right, with a bunch of levers and knobs you can fiddle with and do things. No, it's not. It's a whole bunch of people making decisions. You can't overcome that. Like
Hmm.
you just can't get around that. So let it just go on its own. And this idea that, oh yeah, we'll just put a bunch of tariffs on and step one tariffs, step two question mark, step three profit. Like that's
Right.
basically it. Like, okay, well, that's not going to work that way. Like, no. What's step two there? What? Wait a minute. Like, no, there's a whole lot more to it than you probably are aware. Um, and
Step two question mark. That should be the name of a band or
I
something.
know.
Um,
But that's how a lot of these bureaucrats think.
mhm.
It's like, look, you don't even have any comprehension of the thing that you're trying to control. And yet you think that doing this one cool trick is going to do this thing you think is going to happen. Like, no.
A few episodes back, we talked about uh, competition for the government.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially like a shadow government, like
Yeah.
runs alongside of it, offers the same shit. And of course, there were like complications with that. Like, you can't exactly have one nation operating under two different sets of laws that
Yeah.
may not actually jive.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but beyond that, like from a services standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
or like a collective bargaining
Mm-hmm.
sort of standpoint, let's say, it could make sense. Um,
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that services that could be done completely privately, parallel with government things.
yeah,
There are things that governments tend to have a hard monopoly on. Like you couldn't create a parallel DMV, for instance, in a particular state, because they'd be like,
right,
well, wait a minute, you can't authorize that. But you could create a parallel bus system, or a parallel power company or whatever. There's a lot of different things that could be a parallel. Like I always bitch and moan about TPU and the fees and stuff and like garbage collection and how it sucks. It's like, yeah, you could have a competing garbage system, like a refuse center somewhere that has their own trucks that you
I
could,
think there might be areas where that is the case.
yeah.
Just Tacoma or Washington in general, maybe like it's not.
Yeah,
Um,
actually in like South Hill, the South Hill area, there's a couple competing garbage collection
yeah,
services.
yeah, yeah.
Murray
What's
is one, I think.
the one that has that car museum?
Uh,
McMay,
LeMay, yeah,
LeMay,
yeah.
LeMay. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, and that's good. I think that's a good thing when you at least have a choice of a couple different things
Mhm.
that definitely benefits. It encourages the companies to provide good service and innovate, because when they don't have any competition, there's no incentive to innovate whatsoever. Like, you know, it's you can have any color you want so long as it's black, as Henry Ford said. Like,
Yeah,
I don't like those kinds of situations, and we need to get away from that, I think. And
yeah.
but it takes
But it should remain nonprofit. Like
I agree. Yes.
I think a system like that could be created, could be, of course you can't call it a government,
No.
but what you could do, I think, is call it a political party, let's
Mhm.
say, that is like nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it it it's all about just like bringing people together and working together rather than being this side versus that side.
Yeah.
It would be
Yeah.
all about like, what do we all want? How can we all achieve as much as we can without like completely screwing over our neighbor, like,
Yeah. Yeah. A system that's truly for the people.
yeah, exactly. And if you did something like that, a nonprofit like that, that even openly says, we want to be a competing major political party
Mhm.
that could incorporate into the existing government as it is and bring about real reform,
Yeah.
like, and build a huge movement and then just do that,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
actually play by the rules and
Mhm.
change the system
Yeah.
from the top down. Well, not really though. I mean,
The
you
bottom
build
up.
it from the bottom up
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you go change it from the top down,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing about that is, see, changing people's minds generally requires examples, right?
Mhm.
You could say, oh well, this is how things ought to be, and I deal with that talking about anarchism with a lot of people, because they're like, well, but it wouldn't work. There's no way it would work, and it's like, well, but there are some examples that show that it can, small scale sort of things. It's like, okay, well, that actually does work, and so why can't we just apply that across the board? And because I don't think there should be a big centralized system. There should be a distributed system, and give a lot of options to people. So if you want to live a certain way in a certain society, you have that option. If you want to live a different way in a different society, you have that option too. And
Yeah.
everybody can get along. Like, there doesn't have to be a bunch of conflict. But and you don't need one, like, because that's the thing. Politics in the U.S., the way I see it, is push pull. Like, and it's like a tug of war, and nobody's actually going anywhere, right? They'll pull this way, they'll pull that way, and but never actually affecting any change. And in the
Mm.
meantime, like, everybody else is standing on the sidelines, and nothing's getting better. It's just getting stupider.
I was conversing with AI about that idea, um, which is kind of how I like refined that idea into being one of like a third party
Mm-hmm.
that can build a good following and then do things through the existing channels. But like as soon as AI was like, no, shadow government's illegal, you can't do that. I was like, okay, yeah, but technically, isn't the foundation of the US government technically illegal in the eyes of Britain?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
British law like saw us as traitors.
Yeah.
Um and
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, okay, yeah, actually, like you have a point
This
there.
is true. This is true. Yeah.
So
And
I would argue that when the government starts breaking its own laws, you're already in anarchy. The US is in a state of
well,
anarchy right now.
I would not say anarchy, but chaos. And here's the thing: if you read, people always talk about the founding fathers, right? And if you read, like, the Federalist Papers and some of the writings between the founding fathers at the time, it was very clear that the whole point of this system of governance is that you could get rid of it. Like, if it wasn't functional anymore, you could dissolve it and start over.
Yeah.
Like, they kind of expected that to happen, um and yet it hasn't. And
No,
here
nothing
we are.
nothing actually contradicts that to my knowledge,
Uh-uh.
even to this day. Like the people actually do still hold the power
Hmm.
and could just dissolve the government.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where you need enough people. You need a
Yeah.
movement, and it requires, I think, education. It requires conversation for people because it's like this should be a peaceful thing. I think everybody
Yeah.
can look. Every single human being that lives within, like, say, the U.S. Um, can look at things and be like, "Yeah, this ain't working. We got to do something different."
Yeah.
Obviously, because they get so crazy about it. Like, yeah, okay, well, why don't we start again?
Why don't
We
we
can,
do this? Why don't we, like we work largely, well, like 100% unscripted.
yeah.
Um, Maybe a minute microscopy or two, but what if we just built kind of a manifesto
Hmm.
along those lines
Yeah.
and then drafted like recorded our own TED talk basically
Hmm.
and sent it everywhere, to like directly to people that it might resonate with,
Yeah.
and like and build the following and just start doing it.
Yeah.
Like I I I I'm constantly the gears are churning in my head all the time. Like, what can I do?
Hmm.
I feel powerless, but I know I'm not. So what's the missing piece?
Well,
Like
an
what
an
what can I
individual
do,
an individual may be powerless, but a group of people is not. That's the thing. When you have a
Right.
force of numbers, like you can
Well,
affect change very, very easily and bloodlessly. If, say, like 90% of the populace of an area wants this one thing, they can just make it happen.
so okay, this might go down in history as a poignant quote, but
Mm-hmm.
if you look at it mathematically,
Mm-hmm.
you can't have power in numbers without one individual having power. However minuscule that power is,
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you start adding it up with other people and their minuscule power, you get more and more significant power.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
doesn't come
exactly.
out of nowhere.
Well,
Like,
there's that the statement that was quoted in Star Trek TOS is like, in every revolution there's one man with a vision. So
yeah,
sometimes you do need somebody to kind of spearhead things, like,
yeah.
and that's where it's like, there's a lot of anarchist people that I know who are like anti-hierarchical, and they think like hierarchies are bad, and it's like, no, you do need organization. You need a project manager. Like there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with that, with somebody who's kind of got a bird's eye view and kind of keeps everybody focused, right?
Yeah.
Because you get if, chaos will erupt if everybody is aimlessly running about and doesn't have a clear plan of attack, so to speak.
Yeah, you gotta keep their ego in check, like
Yeah.
don't exalt them. And George Washington was a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
He totally was that guy, right? He
Yeah.
was like, okay, look, I'll lead, but like don't treat me differently. I
Mm-hmm.
don't even know if I want to be called president. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like he was not about this whole like what it's become now. The
Yeah.
most powerful position in the United States and all this shit. And
Like,
it's like,
that's so
well,
stupid.
like, no, it's not.
It,
For one
it
thing, like
it only is because we
you can't really pinpoint the most powerful position
no.
because it
And
depends.
it only is because of faith, because people believe it's the most powerful thing, and they'll
Hmm.
bow to that. But it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, if 5 million people stormed the Capitol and just said, "You're out," well, that would happen. Like, there ain't nothing that anybody can do about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, but then you'd have to go from there, obviously, because again, it's a big, huge bureaucracy. So it's like, yeah, you could cut the head off the Hydra, but another one will emerge immediately, or
Yeah.
two, really. So yeah, and so it's better to have a different plan in place, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but
And executed in such a fashion as what I'm talking about, like a nonprofit political party
mhm,
just gaining momentum
yeah,
can't really be characterized as seditious or anything like that.
no,
Like it's playing by the rules,
yeah.
you know?
Well, and if it were a political party, the whole point of like getting voted in is to kind of like modify things for improvement's sake, like
Yeah.
simplify, modify, dismantle some
Yeah.
stuff, and then replace it with what you're saying, the nonprofit stuff, like, or even just change things to make that more facilitatable, right?
Right.
To make it easier, to remove the barriers, right? Maybe make it easier to have nonprofit clinics, like free clinics and things. Like start there. Start with free nonprofit school systems that are completely different. That that kind of thing. That like
Yeah.
experimental things. And that's kind of the goal. Like, hey, well, we can these things can exist parallel, but we're going to slowly diminish them until they're basically worthless, and we'll just click over to the other system.
Yeah. Like it really should just be comprised, initially anyway, of scholars, doctors, scientists, educators,
Industry
like,
professionals,
yeah,
you
like
know.
people that know their field
Yeah.
and can advise and contribute,
Mm-hmm.
um, sound principles for how to make all those things work together.
Yes.
And really like a political party like that, actually any political party, I feel like, because parties are kind of stupid,
I agree.
should come with its own version. Like, this is what we want the new constitution to look like. Here's all the things that are the same. Like, these were good. We
Mm-hmm.
leave these in.
Yeah.
Here's all the things
Or
that were
maybe clarify
oversights. Yeah.
clarify some stuff that's a little
Like,
ambiguous now.
yeah, like, and things change with the times. It's like these couldn't have been seen. You can't even call it an oversight at that point, but it's like this is something that needs to be addressed now, and here's
Yeah.
us addressing it. Just have that ready to go, and then you can just like get everyone, the 2/3 majority of the states and all that stuff to ratify it, and boom, you've got a new government that isn't going to be like this side versus that side. It's just going
Yeah.
to be people working together.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is because people can work together despite their differences. The differences don't have to turn into conflict.
Mhm.
It's like we can all work, because there's common things that I think everybody agrees are things that are tasks we should be working on,
Yeah.
like that we should be doing these things. And like maybe there's some people who, like, for instance, there's some people who say, well, the space program, that's dumb. But it's like, well, okay, but you can make the argument that it is dumb, that it's kind of a dead end sort of thing. But the things that are discovered over the course of this journey, of this exploration, filter down to everybody. Like
Yeah.
the space program in the US, there are innumerable things that were developed because of the need to go into space, go to the moon, and
Well,
make
yeah.
these probes and stuff. All these,
Studying things without gravity
Mhm.
changes a lot of dynamics in a lot of different fields of science. Like,
Yeah, I'm
I
actually
never even
reading.
thought about that until I read about it. I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, shit. Like,
Speaking of reading, I'm currently reading a book called The Idea Factory that's about Bell Labs Research Center, um, that basically invented transistors and the laser and all kinds of stuff. They and it's kind of going through like the history and stuff, but like it's super fascinating because essentially this company, this for profit company, AT&T, that they just wanted to make money, but they knew that they had to innovate because they wanted to basically interconnect the world with communication. And in order to do that, they had to overcome some pretty significant challenges. So basically, they hired people straight out of college and brought them into this think tank facility where they could just people could kind of dream and experiment and like do science for science's sake, because the thought was like, okay, well, maybe this discovery might not help us right now, but it might help us in the future. Like, oh, this problem we solved here might not do anything, it goes nowhere, but like, oh, we put it on the shelf, and then another problem we run into in the future, oh, we've already solved that problem. Whoop, pull it off the shelf and use it. And yeah, it was a fantastic thing. It's like, that's what we need. We need more of that, right? When it comes to governance and politics and stuff, people like there is, but like we're talking about like science for science's sake, like going to space and whatnot, like there are unseen benefits that go way beyond just the little things that we put our efforts and resources into. Like it may seem dumb to send a probe to Mars, but like all the stuff that we did, all the inventions that were created and challenges that were overcome have other benefits that have nothing to do with a Mars mission.
Yeah.
That can be that benefit humanity essentially. And that's too like a human Mars mission. One of the challenges there is food and water. And whatever inventions are crafted to be able to supply that for that mission could be used terrestrially as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like all that money and effort and time and stuff like that, it does a lot more than just go to Mars.
Right. Like we've talked about with reconstructing a mana machine that has applications on Earth as well as for space travel,
Absolutely,
as well as for deep sea travel. If you know, like if you want to kind of like streamline things on submarines, even like
yep,
just have a mana machine there.
exactly, yeah,
You don't
yeah,
have
no
to
kidding.
like worry about freezing meat and stuff like that.
Yep,
Incredible amount of energy for that, you know?
I know. Yeah, exactly. And that, but see, these are the things that a system like we're kind of developing here would be keen on doing, right? Like you could divert energy to these kinds of tasks and have people, because one of the problems with politics, like pure politics, is they're a bunch of fucking idiots. Like they're signing law, like, and they don't even comprehend, even on a surface level, the thing that they're signing into law. By and large, like, okay, well, that we don't need that. The people who are making decisions about big decisions should be people who are experts, very knowledgeable people, and yet we have a bunch of bumblefucks that you know barely tie their own shoes, making these big ass decisions.
One thing I think would be kind of like a core philosophy for something like we're talking about would be to have a law be a law. Like any bill you introduce should not stray from its fucking point. Like there shouldn't be no like hidden stuff in a bill.
Yep.
Like it's like what do you want the bill to do? Well, we have 762 pages. No, 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 no. Give me one page.
No, I agree.
Tell
Yeah.
me what the bill does. Like,
It's funny because it's like the Constitution and like the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights fits on one piece of paper.
yeah.
And that's the foundation of the rights in the country. That's where everything stems from. The Constitution is a relatively small document, and yet that was good enough. Like, why can't we do that with everything?
Yeah.
Actually, is a good example of how simplicity works really well when you have just one thing. Like in the U.S., it was proposed no tax on tips, right? That passed the Senate unanimously. Every single person was like, yep, I'll vote for that. Everybody. Yeah. It's like, so basically at this point, there's no tax on tips in the US. Like, okay, yeah, you keep it simple. People are like, yeah, that's actually a good idea. I don't see a downside. Yeah. Like, there you go. Keep it easy. It's like, I could guarantee you, because I know there's talk of like getting rid of DST, which, oh my God, I would be like, finally.
All right.
But like, you know, that any bill to eliminate DST would be all chock full of a bunch of bullshit that like one side or the other isn't going to like. And they're like, well, I would totally vote for this, but I don't know about that thing, you know, and then it won't pass. Like, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Just like no tax on tips. Boom, done. Everybody's like, yeah, okay, get rid of DST. Everybody who likes DST, nobody likes daylight saving time. Nobody. Like, I'm sure there's some somebody out there who's like a big fan and they have a whole shrine to daylight saving time or in the corner of their room, but
Yeah.
that's like one guy, you know.
Yeah. Okay. If you introduce a bill to get rid of daylight savings time, I'll allow if you say, and we would like to include one public holiday where everyone gets to get up 1 hour later.
Yeah.
So you can keep that one thing that people like about it.
Keep the tradition alive, basically. Just like dangling, hanging on. Yeah, but
Or
see,
have it be a floating day, like you're late again. Oh, today's my daylight
oh,
saving time day.
yep.
Oh, okay. All right.
You get a pass annually.
Yeah.
You're like, oh shit.
Come in
Well,
the next day late. You're like, you're fired. Like, shit.
I
I
used my
used it
one
up
trip.
yesterday.
But see, like, this is the thing. Like, tackling problems requires actually addressing the problem, whatever it
Yeah.
might be, and not pussyfooting around and Mickey Mousing through like all kinds of stupid stuff. Like, keep it simple. Like, address the problem directly, and there you go.
Yeah.
That or and of course, like we've talked about, using the scientific method, you try one thing and you observe and you wait and you see. There should be a sunset on anything where like it just automatically dissolves if
Hmm.
it isn't re-upped, right?
Yeah.
Like, because then it's like, okay, well, if it's not working, you just let it die. If it is, we're like, yeah, we're going to keep that alive. That was actually turned out to be a good idea. Like, why can't we do things that way?
I isn't it already that way? Like, don't they have to re-up at least certain things? Like,
Certain
I
things
know
like,
the Patriot Act is one of
yep,
those things where
Patriot Act.
they re-up it, right?
Yeah, and it's like, oh, every person that's coming in as president, they say, oh yeah, I'm not going to re-up the Patriot Act, and then they promptly do. Like, dude, that was a long time ago. We've already seen that it doesn't really do
Hmm.
anything. I could have told you back when it was enacted that it wouldn't do anything.
Right.
At
Yeah,
least not its stated goals.
like the more words are packed into a law, the more skeptical you should be of whether it
Yes.
should even be a law.
And anytime
Uh,
it has a name, you can guarantee the effect will be the opposite.
yep.
Like,
Oh yeah.
100%. I have yet to see a law with a name that does that thing. It always does the opposite.
Yeah. Quit naming them too. Like this isn't a fucking school book report. Like you
Mhm.
don't need some creative, clever name. Just
No.
if if your fucking bill has a purpose, just state the purpose.
Yeah.
Have that be the bill. Like
Sure.
this is a bill to remove daylight saving time.
Yeah. And
That's
it's
the
just
name of it.
bill number such
Like,
such and such. Like, that's it.
yeah.
And
Like fucking ugh.
also, it's important, I think, for people in the legislative side of things to pour through the old stuff and cull it.
Yeah.
Like, get rid of stuff that, like, okay, hire some people to analyze something and be like, does this actually do anything? And if they're like, not that we can see, okay, we'll get rid of it.
Mm,
And every step of the way, every action taken by any kind of governmental body ought to be for the people. It should cause a benefit, an improvement of some sort. Like, you can't have legislation for legislation's sake. Like, that is not. I mean, that's what's how we got where we are now.
right.
And things need to be simple, very clear. As I often say, the 10-year-old test. If a 10-year-old kid can't comprehend what this bill says, then okay, back to the drawing board. It ought to be clear as day what's being said.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be all convoluted and complicated and like all this legalese bullshit in there where you have to have an entire library of books to interpret what a particular word means. Like, nah, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And
Or
if like, say for instance, the language, like, let's say the language changes, or like in the culture, to the point where something is muddy or like confusing terminology, well, then you can update it. Like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that word doesn't mean that anymore, so we're going to go back and we're going to just update the language of this text to be more clear to the average person.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that can happen anywhere, anytime. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's it's complicated to make language be concise and clear and
Yeah.
like there's bound to be mistakes. There's not even a mistake necessarily, but just a different way of interpreting it that
Yeah,
maybe you need to rethink.
exactly.
Like
Yeah.
there's no reason to think that these bills are perfect as they are when they get passed by Congress, like
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like the 10 commandments, right? Like
yeah.
you can go
But really, like if
revise
your
things.
bill is contingent on having other things change, so what? Those have to be separate bills,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you can introduce a package of bills, but each fucking thing gets voted on, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Each everything. Like and that's what slows everything down right now is like they go through and they're like arguing over what things should be taken out or changed or whatever
Mhm.
rather than just voting on it. And if it doesn't get voted for, then you have to go back to the drawing board on your
Well,
own fucking time and
one of the
rewrite
problems,
it.
these bills, the problem with the bills is everybody adds a little bit to it,
Hmm.
and they keep, and it's basically like, okay, well, obviously, the bill initially made sense, but now like, oh, this party adds this thing and that party adds that thing, and then they're like, well, I'm not going to vote on that because you added this thing, and so it's like, okay, but we've lost sight of the original intent, right? Like, why
Yeah.
don't we just stick to the original intent and stop tacking on additional things to it, right? Because like, and that's why nothing ever gets done,
Yeah.
because it's like, okay, well, this thing that actually everybody agrees is a good thing, now nobody agrees because it's like, oh well, there's this thing that I can't agree to, my constituents don't want that, oh, and that's going to impact this or that, and like, look, just keep it
And,
simple.
and if you have a more like, complicated goal, you could just introduce a project,
Yeah.
where like the Affordable Care Act should have just been like, hey, I think we can all agree healthcare is a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
Let's focus on, changing
Mm-hmm.
the existing legislation and if necessary, enacting new legislation.
Sure. Well,
Maybe
the
culling
ACA,
old stuff, like whatever, like go through it systematically, scientifically.
yeah, the
And
ACA should have been 5 pages long, but
yeah,
instead it was like 1,100 pages.
yeah.
It's like, what?
Or just an ongoing project, like,
Yeah.
we're going to change things, one by one here and
Yep.
there, see what
Yeah, like
happens.
basically you have a whiteboard with your goals, like, hey,
Mm.
you know, like medical stuff, like that, improve that, there's the goal, and then you have your ideas list of all the
Yeah.
things that go along with it, and you take things one thing at a time. One of the problems with legislation currently is there's so much previous legislation to address, so it's like that's why it gets all complicated, is because it's like it has to reference all these previous
Mhm.
laws. Like, dude, that's the problem. It's, I would say this is where it's like we need to just throw it all away and start fresh and keep it simple, right? Like
Yeah.
as the founding fathers intended and expected, right? That like, yeah, we're going to get to the point where it's all dumb. Well, there are things in place to get rid of the dumb, but nobody wants to do it. And because one of the problems too, it's like it's always it's like, oh, it steps on these toes or those toes or whatever, and like, yeah, whatever. It's like if you shut down an organization, like you had brought up before with the nonprofit, it's like, okay, well, we're closing this organization entirely. Y'all are laid off, and everybody's like, oh my god, my job. It's like, okay, but we're opening a nonprofit that you can then go to work for.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mm.
Like, simple. And it's a self operating system. It's an autonomous, freestanding organization that does that thing, that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with any government organization whatsoever. And there's the doors open for competition too. So
Yeah.
if, like, say, an organization that does like free clinics or something, right, or whatever, and they start sucking, well, then a competitor could come in and build a better system, and like
Yeah.
everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to them because they're so much better, and there you
Hmm.
go. There's nothing wrong with that.
Got some comments.
It
I
should
think
be
she might
one
have come
topic.
in a little late because that's exactly what we talked about.
Oh yeah, it should be one topic per bill. Yeah.
And that would cut down on extraneous crap being hidden. Yep,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
we
exactly.
agree.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and this is the thing. I think everybody can agree on this.
yeah,
It's like, maybe we don't agree on the implementation, but we could try several ways of implementing something. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Like,
right.
because I don't think anybody knows the right way to do anything. And that's where, like you're saying, bring in experts, bring in scientists, bring in engineers, industry professionals and stuff.
Well,
That
I think you had a genius idea a couple weeks ago about, like not only have political positions be lottery based, at least some of them,
yeah.
like certain ones, and then have the issues be what people vote on,
Hmm.
like have the people be Congress,
Yeah. Like, and make it be yeah, you vote on projects.
hmm
Because the thing is, it's possible. Like, I don't think it's possible to get everything done all at once. And I think that's a bad idea. We should never be thinking that, having that in our heads, that that's possible to do. But it should be incremental
hmm
improvement, like the engineering way, right? You start somewhere. If something falls apart, you look at it and say, well, what broke? And then you go back and you build it again. And then you remember that, you put that on the shelf as like, hey, when I'm building this, I don't do it that way because that fell apart. Now I do it
yeah,
this way. And then if that falls apart somehow, then you go back and you look at it and you basically reinforce things more and more until you have a really solid concept that you can, that's like how engineering works. And,
yeah,
like that's how politics ought to work. That's how governance ought to work. That society ought to work. Like, okay, well, we start somewhere. We start with some basic things, and we're open to the idea that, well, it might not work, right? And we
yeah,
try a couple things, and then we just go and build on that and improve. Because you're dealing with complex systems too. You're dealing with a lot of human beings,
yeah,
and not all human beings are homogenous. That's
right.
and that
To
is
me, to me, politics is proof in the pudding that there cannot be a God. If if we haven't figured out a way to even remotely get along
Hmm.
and agree on things, like how is there a plan? Like,
Yeah.
like,
Hmm. Yep, exactly.
nah,
Oh
it's not
man.
possible.
Well, and I think taking out the the greedy benefits that come with a political position, that,
Yeah.
like, basically, again, the lottery idea cuts that down because there's never going to be a reelection because there never was an election. So,
Mm.
you know, um, and
Yeah, just
because
have
that,
the pay be equal to what your regular job was, or, like
or
if you didn't have a job, some kind of minimum or
or
something.
what about a merit-based pay system where if you do, if you're doing well, you get paid a little more. Like,
Yeah.
hey, if your ideas are providing a benefit consistently, well, your pay keeps going up.
The only trouble is like a lot of that stuff takes years to determine
That's
even.
true. That's
So,
true. Yeah, that's a good point.
um, yeah, I think I would just keep it simple. Like if you have a lottery, of course, like now you have to leave your job and do this other job. So like
It
put
should
a
cover that expense.
protection in place for your original job,
Yeah.
create it, like fill it with a temp,
Hmm.
and you get to keep the pay that you had to
Hmm.
do this now,
Yeah.
like,
And
and
maybe
then you go
moving
back to your
costs.
job.
You're expected to move temporarily, moving costs, and it would still be less than a lot of politicians get paid currently.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's like, yeah. I mean, that's a great idea. I, man, that's the thing. Kind of what we're going on about is like it's very evident that
Mm,
something has to change,
yeah.
and it has to, like,
If we keep doing the same shit over and over again, even though everybody can agree that it's broken and
yeah,
everything sucks, like
everything
what
is broken.
What the hell are we doing?
I know. Why do we keep electing people who make these pillow talk promises and then never follow through?
Yeah.
And even though technically they can't do half the things they say they're going to do, it's like, but even then, it's like, why are we looking to this one, the peak, the top of the mountain, to have all the answers for the rest of the mountain?
Like
Like,
what? So I understand why they made it so hard to change the Constitution, right? Like you need two-thirds and this many states and blah blah blah,
yeah.
right? But is that better than just making it easy to change things? And then if you fuck something up, it's easy to change it back, you know?
I mean, that is a good point. Yeah. Which they, well, we saw that with prohibition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they fucked up and it took forever for them to unfuck it, which required constitutional amendment.
Right.
Like, uh, well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. And well, there ought to be, see, and my thought is it shouldn't necessarily be specific rights per se, but more like concepts that are adhered to, like universal concepts that should apply to every human being, that every human being deserves these things, right? Whatever it might be. Um,
Yeah.
and and that everything that is passed has to pass through that filter. So if there's any
Yeah.
kind of thing that violates whatever those conditions are, it can't pass. It's cut off. Like, oh, nope, go back, start again, because that violates principle number 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's where there, believe it or not, there was a lot of argument when the Bill of Rights was created, that like enumerating those rights would be problematic, and of course it is,
Hmm.
and that there were some people who said, well, we shouldn't even have a Bill of Rights because that could be problematic, and it has been.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
you can protect rights without phrasing it in such a way that it sounds like you're bestowing rights upon people.
yeah, well, and it ought to be human derived, right?
Yeah.
Like basically, I don't know. A good example would be like free expression, and the reason you have free expression is because you have a right to self autonomy,
Yeah.
right? You are an individual with your own mind. Your mind is not the mind of any other people, so you can express yourself freely with that without impediment,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And but that isn't exactly how it was phrased. I mean, you look at like the Third Amendment. What the fuck? That makes
Yeah.
no sense. I
Right.
mean, it made sense in the time, obviously. When you look at like the Revolutionary War and what was going on, yeah, the Third Amendment made a hell of a lot of sense then. But like, does it really make sense now? No.
Right.
And, like, and there's a lot of things too, amendments that don't even make sense because if it were founded on simple principles of human autonomy, you wouldn't even need to add those other things like women's right to vote or racial discrimination and whatnot. Like that wouldn't even
Yeah.
be a thing
Yeah.
because you're talking about a human and their individual autonomy.
Yeah. Yeah, same with gender and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah, like, that's a good question. Like when you said it should pass through filters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and just stop right there. Like your your bill is impeding Amendment 3.
Yeah.
Like your
Mm-hmm.
bill is to let soldiers sleep in people's beds. Like, no, no, no. Yeah. So why is it that the judicial system is more of an afterthought
I,
than like a precursor to something even making it to Congress?
I don't know. Because that's a conversation too, like in Washington State too. Like there's some legislation put into place, and people are like, "Oh yeah, there's definitely going to be a lawsuit." But a prerequisite for a lawsuit is some kind of harm being done. So like, what? So you got to wait for there to be a like somebody to die or have their livelihood fucked for now you're going to review it. Well, why didn't you review it before you even let that start?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, like building a structure, right? Like, oh yeah, there's a problem with that design, right? Let's look at it. Oh no, 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 no. We got to build it and wait. And if it collapses, then we'll look at it. Like, what? Are you
Yeah.
fucking high?
Right.
Yeah,
Well, it's kind of like how it used to be to get a restraining order. Well, we got to wait until they try to kill you.
yep,
And then they overcorrected and it was all like, hey, by the way, you have a restraining order because somebody accused you. You
yeah,
know, like
yep. I actually have a friend who he was dating this girl and they got in an argument, and out of he was just frustrated and he poured a soda on her, and she called the cops and said it was domestic violence. They arrested him, and then it became a DV charge, which meant he basically couldn't have guns. So he had a couple of rifles and stuff and had to get rid of them just because he tossed a soda on somebody because they were yelling at each other and
yeah,
heated debate about things. It's like, no, the,
yeah.
the litmus test for that should be a little more strict than
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, you're right. They overcorrected. And now it's like, oh, you call somebody, if you call the cops over a DV incident, somebody has to go to jail. Like, they can't leave without somebody in cuffs. What?
Like
Why can't they
why
come and just be a negotiator and be like, hey, like try to help people. Don't send the cops. Send somebody to.
like there's already a very fundamental thing in place for that. You know,
Mhm,
like if you call the cops and say, "Hey, somebody's stalking me.
mhm.
I'd like a restraining order." Why can't they just say, "Well, you have the Second Amendment, just buy a gun."
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's
if they
true.
come at you, just
Mhm.
fucking kill them and you're protected by law,
Yeah.
you know? Like,
Well, and that the argument over that particular thing, yes, I totally agree. And the counterpoint to that is one thing that people have said about the waiting period being problematic is, yeah, you have an ex who's stalking you and threatening you, and the cops aren't doing anything and they're kind of dismissing you, and so you're like, oh, I guess I'll buy a firearm to protect myself because I'm a single person living by myself.
uh,
And like, you go and you fill out the paperwork. Well, now you got to wait for over a week to get it.
yeah, that's a good
And
point.
like,
Yeah.
that's problematic. Like the, like, I get the point. See, this is like like there's good and bad in things. Like, there's
Yeah, yeah.
like, because it's like, I understand why. Oh yeah, because somebody who's angry and thinking of doing harm to somebody, give them a cooling off period before they can get a gun if they don't already have one.
Yeah.
Sure, I get it. I understand
But
that.
if you already own a gun and you get angry, there's nobody stopping you.
Yeah, see, that's kind of the argument people have made. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, the people who are likely to do harm probably already have guns.
Yeah.
Like, the people who want to defend themselves, like, because maybe some woman or whatever, like, they never thought they would want a gun, so they never got one. They never went through all the process and stuff like that. But now they're in a sticky situation where somebody's threatening them, and they feel like their life is in danger. They should be able to get a gun right away. There shouldn't be a waiting period. And maybe that's where a conditional system would make more sense. Where, like, if you could make the case of like, hey, I have a crazy ass ex who's like been threatening me and like leaving notes and sending nasty grams and stuff like that saying I'm gonna kill you. Like, yeah, you should fast track that one. They ought to
Right.
have a gun right fucking now.
Yeah. That's a good point. You know, what one thing about East Germany, you were allowed to have guns in East
Mm-hmm.
Germany,
Yeah.
but they were kept locked up by the government, and you had to go and say, "Hey, I'd like to check out my gun for a while," and explain and stuff. You know what? That's not that bad of a system. They let
Yeah.
you have the guns. You could go there and give them some bullshit like, "I'd like to go hunt elk," and then shoot them in the fucking skull
That's
immediately.
true.
You know,
Although
like,
you do run into bureaucratic things where the system could be, like, not really very agreeable when it comes to granting permission for something like that. And
hmm,
like, the other thing is, you don't always know. Like, you can't necessarily know in advance that something could happen.
right.
Um, And so it's like, well, that is a problem there. I mean, I think common
Yeah.
sense is, like, I
Quick,
would
somebody broke into my house 30 minutes ago and I managed to escape. I'd like a gun just in case they're still there.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, fill out this form.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and then yeah, we'll give you a call back. Um, yeah.
Have a seat in the waiting room and
Mhm.
someone will be with you in zero point 0.5 to 3 hours.
Anywhere between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Just like the Comcast technician. Um, well, yeah, and I think one thing that would go a long way, it would be education. I believe, like when speaking about firearms, that there should be at least a class at some point when you're in school that
Hmm.
deals with firearms safety. Like it should be a class taught by like a cop or a soldier or whatever, somebody who's familiar with that stuff. You go to a range, you handle a firearm, you shoot it, they give you the safety practices, and you understand things. Like, because so many accidents happen out of ignorance. And people just thinking, oh, it's a toy, just like in the movies. I've been watching GI Joe or whatever, and pew pew pew, and bang, your best friend is dead now.
Well, it was like part of gym class at
Yeah.
some point in history, right?
Hmm, yeah.
So it kind of was, taught in,
And
and you know what? You had like way less gun problems back
yep,
then.
exactly. Yeah. And it goes back to kind of, well, we're talking about all kinds of things here, but that education has failed. The education system in the US and probably in a lot of places in the world has failed the
Yeah,
children. um, we need to be teaching things, life skills,
yeah,
right? Like auto shop, wood shop, home economics, like real home economics, like it used to be, ought to
yeah.
be taught. Like a firearm safety course. You should learn budgeting. You should learn about law. Learn about politics. Learn about economics. Like stuff that you will deal with in your adult life should be handed to
How
kids.
how to do taxes.
How
And
to do
oh,
taxes. Yeah.
wait a minute. If you can't teach a class on how to do taxes because it changes every year and it's way too complicated, well, then that needs to change.
Yes. Yeah. Uh uh Cue fair tax. Like there you go. Go to
Yeah,
that, make it simple. It's pretty obvious. You don't even have to do taxes at that point. Like the only thing you're doing is maybe filling out some paperwork so that you can get a check.
yeah.
you know? But if you don't fill that out, you don't get a check and nobody comes and arrests you. There you go. Simple. Like that. But we can't, this is the thing. Unless we implement a political system like we're kind of talking about, it's impossible to be able to affect these kinds of changes that would clearly benefit the public. It's like, yeah, don't we want people to not stress out come tax time? Don't we
Yeah.
want people to not like have fucking heart attacks and car accidents because you go roll back an hour or forward an hour? And like, could we just not do that? Like
Right.
these things that serve no purpose whatsoever. Like, but it's like pulling teeth, getting any kind of change to happen.
Huh.
I just, oh man.
We're definitely on to something. I'm
Mhm.
there's there's certain like social media, uh, I don't want to say influencers, but like, people that are having a lot of traction and visibility in things that they're saying. And I'm trying to get in touch with them to run ideas like this by them
Mhm.
if I think they're open to it, because like that's the best way to like plant the seed.
Well, in actually, yeah, YouTubers and social media
Yeah.
people, like nuclear power is back on the table because of the likes of like Kyle Hill and some other major people who people like respect, who are talking about nuclear power and educating people about it. And now people are starting to be less afraid and more excited about it. Like, this is good. This is what we need. We could do the same thing with anything. And I like, as much as I hate politics, I think you're right. The best way to is to fight fire with fire, basically.
Yeah.
Like, form a political party and move forward with it, try to get
Well, it's like
traction.
you were saying, you were thinking of running for mayor of Tacoma,
Yeah.
and I was like, you know what? An anarchist in government is exactly what we need.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Well,
Like
yeah, because it's like,
that's an underrepresented, underrepresented philosophy,
yeah,
that,
it is.
politically.
Oh, so wholly underrepresented. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
So
and, I don't think it's bad to have new schools of thought come into play. And because it's like, I don't believe the answer to everything is more government, more regulation. I think it's people, it's human interaction, it's building like a society, building, uh, I guess, connections between people. Like that's how you do things. That's what we need. We don't need more division. That's not going to fix things. There's a lot of people who say, "Oh yeah, we got to divide more, divide and conquer." Like, no, 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 no. The best thing we could do is fucking sit down, have a beer, smoke a joint, and have a conversation. Like there you go. Like, and try to focus on things from a logical and scientific and engineering sort of approach.
mm,
Um, and well, yeah, the powers that be don't want that, of course, because then they lose power. But I want to
yeah,
put power back in the hands of the people. That's essentially what I want.
yep, yeah. That should be the goal, and that should be like kind of the linchpin of any, any founding documents, let's
Yeah.
say, is to ensure, and I get that was kind of the point of the original Constitution, but it, of course, missed a few things.
Well, yeah, and this goes back to engineering. Like,
Yeah,
okay, that was an unprecedented thing. The
yeah,
foundation of the USA was
yeah,
absolutely new. It was a completely new experiment. And these guys, yeah, there were a lot of brilliant people that penned all of the documents and came up with these really good ideas that, yes, they were a vast improvement on what came before, but they were not perfect. And they knew that. Like,
yeah.
that's how smart they were, is they knew, hmm, you know, we don't really know everything. Um,
Well,
and
this government we have now is kind of like the very first firewall that was ever invented for the internet.
yeah.
And hackers have gotten through it, but we're like, but we gotta stick with the original firewall. The
Yeah, I
guy
like
that
the look of
came up
that
with the
box.
firewall was a visionary, and it cannot be
Mm.
possibly improved upon.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. That's it. And that's where it's like we need to then analyze the current state of things and make modifications to make
yeah,
improvements. See where it falls short. See where there's cracks in the
yeah,
foundation or
the
the
next round
structure.
of hackers will get through, and then you got
Mhm.
to change it again.
Yeah. Well,
So
and
you
that
got to keep it able to be changed. You got to have the fluidity
yeah.
and the sense of urgency to respond to these things.
And I would say when I'm talking about like the foundational principles that everything is born out of, you need to like we would need to create those principles based on immutable characteristics, right? Like
Mhm.
human beings and things that every single human being can agree is like fundamental to ensuring your being is the best it can be, basically,
Mhm.
or can be safe or free or whatever, that kind of thing. And the things that don't change, right? Because it's like the human beings of today are really not that different than human beings of 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Like we're kind of the same, and we have the same needs. Like, yeah, technology and society and civilization has changed, but like at the end of the day, we're still the same meat sacks that we were way back when,
Yeah.
and our needs are no different. So if it starts from there, and like that way, because like yeah, people can look at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and look at it and be like, oh yeah, but things are a little bit different. Well, yeah, because they didn't talk about human beings per se, and they didn't
Right.
justify it from a human being standpoint. It was like, oh yeah, there is that, there is this, there is that. Like, I mean, yeah, if you read the Federalist Papers, you get a pretty good sense of why. But the why should be in the text.
Yep.
That's the thing.
Thou shalt not ban Pornhub and stuff like that. You know,
Yes,
the
that's
things
number
that really matter.
one.
Yeah.
And X Hamster too. I like people talk shit about X Hamster, but they're better than Pornhub. But um, yeah, I, man,
I've
this
never
is
heard of it, but I don't think I want to know why it's got hamster in the name.
it has nothing to do with animals.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know either where that came from, but
But don't take my word for
yeah. Go there yourself.
it.
www.hamster.com.
Well, I think that's all the time we've got for today.
Yeah. Before I share my screen.
Demonetized.
Yep. But I think we covered a lot of really interesting things, and like the more we talk about this, the more clear it gets. And we're like
Yeah.
whittling away the chaff, essentially getting to the core of things. And I think it's a worthy endeavor,
Yeah.
honestly. Like, why
You know,
not?
I would hope that these same, influencers would be willing to come on the show and have discussions like this
Sure.
to bounce ideas back and forth and expose these conversations to their followers and
Yeah.
you know get people thinking about these things because these are good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
They're not perfect ideas and they
Nope.
need honing and further
Mm-hmm.
perspectives to provide input.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like
Well, and
we
that's the
can't
only
do
way.
that alone.
No. Well, like you had said in a previous video, no man is an island.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're not going to get very far as working as a lone wolf. You need the help of others. It takes a village,
Yep.
um, and and that's the important thing. And I think also having a clear vision of why and the direction to go in, like, and it has to be something that is almost universal, and it needs to stick, like it has to adhere to that at all costs. That is the whole point. And because you get a lot of people, it's just like the bills, right? Everybody puts their 2 cents in, and pretty soon it's a mess.
Yep.
Like, okay, there's definitely room for discussion, but it has to be logical, and there has to be some justification for adjustments. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the Bills, they almost never win the Super Bowl.
Well, okay. Hopefully, everybody enjoyed that. I think we're well over an hour in, so
Yeah.
we'll
I
we
should
won't we
pack it
won't
in.
yeah, we won't be on next week, but we'll be on the week after. So yeah,
Maybe.
maybe, yeah, we'll see. We
Maybe
might
we
take
just need a vacation.
exactly. That's the thing. It's good for the soul.
Yeah. Eric might get lost in the desert.
You might end up on some island all like by yourself or something. Oh yeah.
Hope- Hopefully not in an El Salvadorian prison.
Oh man, well
One
you're
never
in Germany,
knows.
so like the odds are low. Oh man. All right. Well, everybody, stick around till next time, whenever that is, and yeah, take care of each other out there.